Heaven Official's Blessing, Chapter 9. The Mountains Lack Ancient Temple, the Forest of Hanging Corpses. Fuyao noticed that little Ying was hiding within the crowd of people. Frowning, he asked, "Why is there a woman here?" Although his tone wasn't aggressive, it didn't contain any goodwill either. Thus, when little Ying heard of it, she bowed her head. Shilian was the one who replied for her and said, "She was afraid that we'll meet a mishap, so she came here to take a look." Fuyao turned to ask the bystanders another question. "Did you guys come up here with her?" At first, the people in the crowd hesitated a bit before they replied, "I don't remember anymore. It's hard to say." "That's wrong. When we came up, she wasn't with us, right?" "In any case, I didn't see her." "I didn't see her either." Little Ying hastily spoke up. "It's because I secretly followed you guys." The youngster immediately asked, "Why did you secretly follow us? Do you have a guilty conscience? Perhaps you're the disguised ghost bridegroom." The moment he said this, the people standing around Little Ying abruptly fled, creating a vast and empty space. Little Ying began waving her hands in a flustered manner before she said, "No, no, I'm Little Ying. I'm really her." Then she turned toward Shilian and said, "Young lord, we had just met each other. I helped you put on makeup and helped you dress and groom yourself." When they heard this, everyone began looking over to stare at him. There were even some people who started to whisper things. In bits and pieces, Shilian heard phrases like kink, different from ordinary people, "I can't believe it." Coughing twice, Shilian explained, "This is just a requirement for the mission. A requirement of the mission. Nanfeng, Fuyao, you guys." It was only after he turned his head and Shilian became aware that Nanfeng and Fuyao were staring at him in a strange manner. In addition, they began slowly moving away from him in a restrained way. Being stared at with gazes like that made Shilian feel goosebumps all over his body. He asked them, "Do you guys have something you want to say?" How could Shilian have known that a girl's skill in makeup created legendary and mystifying results? Little Ying had only taught him how to fix his eyebrows by drawing them elegantly, how to powder his face with some white powder, and how to dot his lips with deep red rogue. However, if he didn't speak, Shilian looked exactly like a gentle, soft, and beautiful young lady. Thus, when those two looked at him, it made their heart shake tremendously. They found this scene hard to believe. It made them feel uneasy, from head to toe, as they began to doubt life itself. Shilian's face still looked like his face, but both Fuyao and Nanfeng felt as if they didn't know who they were talking to when they faced his current appearance. Fuyao asked Nanfeng, "Do you have something you wish to say?" Nanfeng immediately shook his head. "I don't have anything I want to say." Shilian replied, "Perhaps it's better if you guys said something." At this time, the people in the crowd began speaking up. "Eh? This is Mingguang Temple? This mountain's forest actually had a Mingguang Temple? Odd. I've never seen it before." One after another, everyone began looking at the strange sight. However, Shilian suddenly said, "Yes, it's a Mingguang temple." Nanfeng noticed that his tone was a bit odd. He asked, "What's wrong?" Shilian replied, "The north is clearly General Mingguang's territory. It isn't as if the incense burning for him wasn't flourishing, and it's not like his spiritual power is weak. However, why is there only a Nanyang temple under Mount Yujun?" It was rather easy to understand why that official would send his prayers to the martial god Heavenly Emperor. After all, he had been the number one martial god for the last millennium, and his status far exceeded General Mingguang's. Naturally, the higher and more influential you went, the more insured and secured one would be. However, General Mingguang's position was equal to General Nanyang's position, and there was hardly any difference between the two of them. If you really had to differentiate them, then General Mingguang had 9,000 temples, 1,000 more than General Nanyang. Shilian really couldn't understand why General Mingguang would give up something close and instead seek something far away. He continued speaking and said, "Normally, even if the Mingguang temple on Mount Yujun is taken over by the ghost bridegroom, resulting in other people being unable to find it, one could always just build another Mingguang temple somewhere else. However, for what reason would another martial god's temple be built here?" Fuyao immediately understood and said, "There has to be another reason." Shilian replied, "Yes, there has to be another reason that would make the people of the Mount Yujun region stop building Mingguang temples. You guys, please lend me some spiritual energy again. I'm afraid I have to go and ask." At this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "So many brides, huh?" When he realized that the voice had come from within the temple, Shilian immediately turned around. He had told these people to properly stay on the open space outside the temple, but they actually turned a deaf ear to his instructions and ran inside. Nanfeng yelled, "The situation is dangerous, don't run about." However, that youngster said, "Everybody, don't listen to them. They won't dare to touch us. We're all good people. Would they really dare to kill us? Everyone, get up, get up, get up." This youngster actually realized that the three of them wouldn't seriously hold down their waist and give them a beating. Thus, he began to become absolutely unrestrained. Saying this, Nanfeng's knuckles began to crack, and he seemed like he was trying to restrain himself. However, as a martial god under Nanyang Palace Hall, he really couldn't beat up an ordinary person just because he wanted to. If a supervising heavenly official found out about it and reported him, then the aftermath really wouldn't be fun to deal with. The youngster laughed mischievously before sneering. "Don't think I can tell what you guys are trying to do. You just want to deceive us and make us stay put, so you guys could solve this case all by yourselves and then collect the reward." With those instigating words, at least half the people in the crowd actually became restless. Thus, they followed the youngster and began running into the temple. Fuyao apathetically brushed his sleeves and said, "Let them do what they want, this group of weak commoners." His tone sounded extremely loathing, like he no longer wanted to care about what happened to them. Then, within the Mingguang temple, came another loud scream. "These are all people, huh? These are all dead people, huh?" The youngster was also greatly shocked as he asked, "All dead?" "All dead." "What evil rituals? Some of these brides died decades ago, so how could their skin have not rotten yet?" However, it didn't take long for the youngster to get over his surprise. "It's fine if they're dead. Let's carry the corpses of their dead brides down the mountain. After all, how could the people from their families not buy them back?" When he heard that, Shilian's gaze gradually sank, and after the group of people thought it over, they began thinking that this was reasonable. Some people sighed, some people muttered under their breaths, and some people became more cheerful. Shilian stood near the doorway of the temple and said, "It's better if everybody comes out first. For many years, a breeze hadn't passed through this temple, and thus the death chi has settled in. If ordinary people breathe it in, it won't be good for them. His words made a lot of sense, and everyone didn't know whether or not they should listen to him. Then Little Ying spoke up quietly. Everyone, stop being like this. It's this dangerous here. Won't it be better if we listen to this young lord? Come outside and sit down now. However, this crowd of people didn't even listen to Shilian and his team, so how could they listen to her? Nobody paid any attention to her at all, but Little Ying wasn't discouraged and repeated her words a few more times. Ignoring her, the youngster began instructing the crowd. Everyone, we must choose the freshest corpses. If the corpse is too old, who knows if their family members are still living on this world. This way, we won't have to waste our strength carrying the corpses down the mountain. Unexpectedly, there were actually people who praised the youngster for being smart and efficient. When he heard that, Shilian didn't know whether he should cry or laugh. Then, Shilian saw someone start moving and immediately warned. Don't take off their veils. Those veils can block the dead chi and yang chi. The yang chi in your bodies is too strong. If the corpses absorbed it, I can't guarantee that nothing would happen. However, because this group of people wanted to pick out the freshest corpses, they had already taken off almost all of the veils. Shilian exchanged a glance with Nanfeng, who had just walked over to the doorway, before shaking his head. He knew that he wouldn't be able to stop this crowd of people. After all, it wasn't like he could give them a beating until they vomited blood and couldn't move anymore. If they did that and something happened later, wouldn't their wounds prevent the crowd of people from trying to run away? Shilian truly felt quite helpless. At this moment, a buff guy removed one of the bride's veils and exclaimed, "The fuck? This young lady is really beautiful enough to the point she could ascend to the heavens." Everyone began gathering around him as people started discussing her. She probably hadn't even crossed her husband's door yet, right? Dying like that is really too unfortunate. Her clothes are a bit worn out, but this girl is truly the most beautiful. This bride had probably just died recently, because the skin on her face was still quite flexible. Someone provocatively asked, "Does anyone dare to touch her face?" The youngster immediately replied, "Why wouldn't we dare to?" The moment he finished saying that, he pinched the corpse's face twice. The youngster only felt that the skin beneath his hands felt smooth like tofu, making people's hearts feel itchy. He wanted to grope this girl a few more times. Shilian truly couldn't continue watching this scene anymore and was just about to go over there to stop the youngster. However, Little Ying had already rushed over and said, "Don't be like this." The youngster easily gave her a push and said, "Don't hinder us big men from doing things." However, Little Ying curled up again and said, "Doing something like this, you guys are truly just courting wrath from heavens." This time, the youngster became angry. "Fuck, you ugly person. Not only you're ugly, but you're bothersome as well." While he cursed her out, the youngster started kicking at her as well. Shilian reached over to grab the back of Little Ying's collar and lightly lifted her away from him. Who would have thought that after he had done that, he suddenly heard a bam noise before the youngster yelled, "Who hit me?" Shilian turned around to take a look. That youngster's head was unexpectedly badly bruised, and it even had a big hole. A stone covered in blood fell onto the ground. Little Ying blankly stared at it for a moment before she hastily said, I'm sorry. I was scared and accidentally threw it." However, even if Little Ying rushed to admit her wrongs, nobody would believe her. This was because the direction that rock had come from was completely incorrect. That stone had been thrown into the window that was behind the youngster. Thus, the moment that youngster had yelped in pain, everyone had looked over in that direction. They had been just in time to see the shadow of a person's figure flit past the window. The youngster yelled in a strange manner. "It was him! It's that ugly creature with the bandages wrapped around his face." Shilian stuffed little Ying into Nanfeng's hands before taking 2 steps over there. Then, gently supporting himself by placing his right hand onto the window frame, he flipped out of the room and began chasing the creature into the forest. A few braver people who wanted to get the reward also followed him and jumped out of the window. However, when he reached the edge of the forest, Shilian suddenly smelled the reeking odor of blood. Being extremely vigilant, he sensed something was wrong and immediately halted his steps. "Don't go in!" Shilian had already spoken up to warn them, but those people thought to themselves that it was great he wasn't chasing after it, because now they could. Their steps didn't stop, and they instead charged right into the forest. The rest of the crowd that had been originally in the temple began rushing out as well. When they saw Shilian standing at the edge of the forest, those that weren't too brave began gathering around him to watch. It didn't take too long before they began hearing a few blood-curdling screams. A few black shadows began stumbling out of the forest. They were exactly the people who had taken the lead in charging into the woods. Staggering out, these black shadows swayed around until they reached a spot where the moonlight shined down and illuminated them. And the moment everyone saw their appearances clearly, they were immediately terror-stricken by the sight. When these people walked into the forest, they were still living humans. So why was it that when they walked out, they became people drenched in blood? From their faces to their clothes, these people were all covered with blood stains. It looked as if blood was gushing out of their bodies. If a regular person had bled this much blood, then it was impossible for them to continue living. However, step by step, these people were still walking over to them. Everyone became so scared, they began uniformly scrambling backwards until they were hiding behind Shilian. Shilian raised his hand and said, "Be calm, the blood isn't theirs." Sure enough, those people said, "That's right, the blood isn't ours. It's... Even though their faces were covered in blood, it still wasn't able to conceal their completely frightened looks. Following their gazes, the rest of the crowd shifted their eyes over to the forest. It was quite dark, so it was hard to tell what exactly was going on within the woods. Shilian grabbed a torch and went a few steps forward as he held the torch up to illuminate the forest. Within the woods, something dripped onto his torch, making a sizzling sound. Shilian glanced at his torch before shifting his gaze upwards. After contemplating for a moment, he lifted his hand and threw his torch. Even though the torch only illuminated the sky for a short moment, everyone still clearly saw what was on top of the trees. Very long black hair, a deathly pale face, a tattered military official robe, and an arm that kept swaying back and forth in the air. More than 40 corpses of men were swaying in the air, hung upside down at various heights on the trees. Shilian didn't know how long the fresh blood had flowed for, but it still hadn't dried. Drip, drop, drip, drop. This created the frightening scene of a forest filled with corpses as blood rained down from above. The crowd of people outside were all strong and buff men. However, when would they have ever seen a gruesome sight like this? They were all frightened so badly they completely blanked out as not a single voice could be heard. And when Nanfeng and Fuya walked over and saw this sight, both of their gazes became focused. After a moment, Nanfeng said, "Green ghost." Fuya replied, "Indeed, this is his favorite trick." Nanfeng told Shilian, "Don't go over. If it's really him, then this is going to become a bit troublesome." Shilian turned around to ask, "Who are you guys talking about?" Nanfeng responded, "A near devastation." Confused, Shilian asked, "What's a near devastation? Something approaching the devastation rank?" Fuyo replied, "Not bad. Near devastation green ghost. He's precisely a wrath that had been assessed by Lingwen Palace Hall, and they claimed that his realm was actually awfully close to the devastation rank. He's extremely fond of stringing corpses on trees and making a forest of corpses. This kind of game. It could be even said that it's part of his famous reputation." When he heard Fuyo's explanation, Shilian thought in his